Sailor Moon is unquestionably one of the greatest anime and manga of all time. Its popularity seems to be enduring the test of time as well, selling an estimated 46 million manga volumes, as well as raking in hundreds of millions of yen each fiscal year. It's not like Dragon Ball, which ended within the same decade, that has a seemingly infinite amount of new content to push forward. But still, being able to retain such a level of popularity is a miracle in itself in a world of constant new manga and anime. So, what makes Sailor Moon so endearing after 30 years of love and justice? Sailor Moon internalizes the magical girl genre with particular recurring patterns or tropes. One thing you might notice is that Sailor Moon rarely delves into the world of physical violence. How many scenes can you count like Venus stabbing Beryl, Galaxia strangling Sailor Moon, or Princess Kakyu being impaled? This is a result of how the author, Naoko Takeuchi, constructs her feminism. It's a feminism of optimism, but also one she grounds in physical reality as she understands it. At the time of Sailor Moon's creation, a young Takeuchi in her 20s had been in the manga game for about 5 years after finishing her degree in chemistry. As time went on, fans would learn about her motivations, her ideas, and what made Sailor Moon tick. As her manga would make you think, she didn't care about her male characters all that much. In fact, she believed women had the upper hand in Japanese society. However, that wouldn't mean Takeuchi didn't fall back on some very socialized ideas. That, of course, she would want to be held and protected by a man. And it's true that we see these desires in Usagi as a soldier of love. At the time before her marriage to Yoshihiro Togashi, she remarked that the ideal type of man did not exist, and that women always had to keep looking, fantasizing, etc. So there's a sordid idealism in Tuxedo Mask, one that's rooted in societal ideas of what women and men are not only socialized to be like, but also what to want. This is, of course, contradicted by the very nature of the plot and the dissonance we see between the characters and their villains who do not occupy these conventional traditions. For instance, if we look at Galaxia, she is very Nietzschean in her motivations and desires. It's about her will to power. Trash is still trash until it dies. And she would kill the entire universe to have it remade in her image. There is no deeper psychological trauma, but instead something that simply exists because it does. I find this infinitely more compelling because it's a realistic archetype, rarely applied to women, and because fairly often people are uncomfortable with the type of person who simply is. In the emptiness of space, a quantum fluctuation simply can be, and therefore, there is something. You might argue, the fields were always there in some capacity, but what the field decides stochastically wasn't. This is an upset in the balance, because while Usagi demands a normal life, the narrative frequently denies her that. Takeuchi would characterize this as evil men always trying to hold women down so they cannot fight and show their power or beauty. Although the real-life parallels are men, the villains are typically women, at least insofar as the major villains go. By the time Sailor Stars rolled around, Takeuchi wanted things to be as big and bad as possible. The final outing would truly be a grand one. It is because of this that Galaxia is not merely a stand-in for oppression. In fact, her humanity shines through before she dies. Because Galaxia is a fighting woman herself. She is a woman who is unrestricted by notions of normality, however, because she is war and she is power as a living, breathing woman. But she is a human woman nonetheless. The way Sailor Moon is written with this optimism seems entirely different to the way a modern Takeuchi thinks. Now what we see is not someone bubbly thinking that women have the upper hand, but a critic of the state of womanly affairs in Japanese society. She is all too aware of how misogynistic it can be and how quality of life can be for other, less fortunate women. At the end of Sailor Moon, and I'm going to spoil this, so you can stop watching if you don't know, we learn that Sailor Cosmos is Sailor Moon from the future. She loses the cosmic fight against Sailor Chaos and loses all hope. The villain wins. How deceptively morbid we've all been led down this narrative rabbit hole. But Usagi inspires hope. She inspires hope in her future self to continue onward and persist despite the insurmountable chaos ahead. She's lost, but she'll keep fighting no matter what. That is the tepid story of women's rights throughout history. That is the journey, and it's one so many women can relate to on some level. The schoolgirl bliss and levity that a crybaby like Usagi embodies. The cool girl they aspire to be as she fights monsters and evildoers by moonlight with her cool talking cat. But at some point, she grows up, and that levity subsides. She matures from a girl into a woman who knows how cool and terrible the world can be. She's not a crybaby. She's far more tempered, but still, in spite of how bad things get, women remain beautiful and fight against the odds. That is the essence of Sailor Moon. If you recall a moment ago, I spoke of Takeuchi's foundation in physical reality. There is a deliberate choice for the magical element of Sailor Moon. The action is removed from the girls personally. It's the act of magic that becomes a barrier. Women are, on average, much weaker than men physically. A woman has to train extra hard to beat men that aren't trained as well. It's just a fact of sexual dimorphism for the average woman. This is realized in magic. I'm reminded of Lisa from JoJo for a moment. The author Araki had clarified that a woman will not beat a man in a physical fight, so the way he alleviated that was with supernatural powers. Now, while it's possible to use magic and so forth to create a physical brand of violence that puts the girls there as Skubandeka does, that is not a consistent trope of the magical fighting girl. I first noticed this while reading through papers in Japanese academia, so it's not like I'm the first person to notice and comment on it. Well, Skubandeka was popular too, so it's not just Sailor Moon's method to the violence, but it fits well with what it represents. Pretty women doing cool things that relate on a topical level to a woman's journey. One might describe it as a political power fantasy of sorts, but let's look at it another way. I recall reading a brilliant book analyzing the nature of martial arts and its cinema. In it, the author cited a couple of studies, or rather research papers, that pornography was the opposite of martial arts. And while he expressed some doubts about the conclusion, I have found this to be immensely accurate in application. While pornography is the degradation of lust, martial arts is the convalescence of the human body's artistic expression. Similarly, I find that Sailor Moon at its core is a story of artistic convalescence. It is one that represents the magic of a girl's beauty and strength through artistic expression. While I could say more about Takeuchi, feminism, and how it relates to Sailor Moon, I think another focal point is the aesthetic. One theme in Sailor Moon, and it's even in the title, SHOUJO, is beauty. And Takeuchi's art style, if it is anything at all, is beautiful. Long, elegant, flowing lines that create supermodel-esque characters, despite the fact they're all pretty short. The art, at times, reminds me of exactly what I would see a fashion designer draw in her notebook. The long lines, wavy hair, and skinny bodies are remarkably similar, while the faces can be difficult to tell apart without other features. Each of the sailors is striking and distinguishing. She found her own design archetypes, and they've become iconic. While the idea of sailor suits wasn't hers, and who knows what they might have been otherwise. Tuxedos? It pairs remarkably well with the planetary themes. Mercury, the bashful brainiac in knee-high blue boots with the power of water. Mars, the sophisticated, cool, and collected maiden of fire in red heels. Jupiter, the worst sailor, but the tall and powerful girl with electrical powers and green booties. Venus, the elegant, intercontinental blonde that can sing. She'll always yearn for love, but never find it. Then there's the outer Senshi, Pluto, the mystical and mysterious green-haired beauty that controls time. Uranus, the cool ladies' lovin' butch that drives a race car and flies a helicopter when she's not shaking the world. Then there's the feminine and eloquent violinist, Neptune, matching with the aquamarine water she controls. Last, but not least, there's Saturn, the noir-haired girl with a cute face of death and destruction. All of these designs work, and they work well. They're pretty girls in cute outfits with cool powers, and Takeuchi knows how to frame them. The girls will be posed dynamically with a soft color palette, usually some sort of cosmic or floral motif in an elegant composition. Similarly, the anime works by amending the art style. The floral and cosmic motifs appear occasionally. The long legs appear by virtue of the miniskirts, but the fashion style of the lines and designs disappear. The characters become just a bit more realistic. The colors fade from the age of the film the traditional animation was shot on, and people admire the pastel pinks. People that haven't even watched or read Sailor Moon admire the art style and the compositions. It's become the iconic anime in that regard. The next thing Sailor Moon owes its success to is a subgenre of aesthetics. The aesthetics of personality, or characterization. While the manga is a love story that depicts Usagi's mind mood by mood as she traverses the ever-changing and scary world before her in melancholic bliss, the anime plays up the relationship between the characters. You don't want to skip an episode because you want to see how Usagi and Rei or Ami and Minako will react to one another in the episode. Or maybe everyone as a group. Is it really filler if the anime is so different? These focuses are not in the manga, and you might consider that this wide-reaching and friendly depiction of girls' friendships isn't the purely romantic, melancholic story that Takeuchi wanted to tell. In fact, the anime had a lot of problems from her point of view, most notably the homophobic changes to the starlights and so forth. In fact, the anime adds a lot of unnecessary homophobia. There are a lot of trade-offs one way or another, but it's the lively characters in a desperate but grand situation that makes Sailor Moon stand out. You watch it because you love those moments, and then you're met with this zany magical action. But maybe the following episode is a mythology episode, and you get that serious, somber tone as the characters have to grapple with serious themes. The girls you've come to love, that goof around at a cafe or arcade, are under siege. Everyone's dying. Usagi's child from the future has been magically made into a grown woman that's replaced some of the arc's villains that are now good. And then she does the unthinkable. If you know, you know. It's a wild ride. You get that slice of life buzz before going on an adventure into the pits of despair. It's great. And you get an image of the girls' minds every step of the way. That's what makes it fundamentally shoujo, and an aspect of why shoujo is such an amazing genre of work. One scene that sticks out to me is during the 4th season, Super S, where the girls finally learn the Amazon Quartet is evil. The surprise, the betrayal, the angst and anger, the transformations with the music, it's just so good. The music throughout Sailor Moon is super solid too. It doesn't have the dull, wannabe 70s martial arts soundtrack Dragon Ball suffers from. It's more what you'd expect from a 90s great like Yu Yu Hakusho's. I could go on and on about everything that makes Sailor Moon endearing, and why you should consider reading or watching it. The worst thing that could happen is you didn't like it. Or maybe you develop a crippling addiction and it consumes your life as you approach 30. Maybe Sailor Moon in moderation for whoever you are.